Hi everyone, good day to you all. My name is Ravi Kumar. Today I will introduce CRFC and our today's speaker, Dr. S.K. Gupta. CRFC is Climate Risk and Finance Council. It is a global non-profit organization. CRFC's mission is to provide thought leadership in perceiving climate risk and its impact on financial institutes. Another one is CRFC develops resources for climate change mitigation and adaptation. In this regard, CRFC conducts a series of master classes. In this process, today's master class is on what are carbon credits in agriculture by Dr. S.K. Gupta. Dr. S.K. Gupta has got many educational credentials. He has M.Com with gold medal and has PhD. He is FCS and FCMA. He is MD of RVO of Institute of Cost Accountants of India. Also, he has got 42 years of corporate experience. RVO means a Registered Valuers Organization, which is a part of Institute of Cost Accountants of India. Really, we are privileged to have masterclass by Dr. S.K. Gupta on what are carbon credits in agriculture.
Thank you.
Without further ado, I am handing over to Dr. S.K. Gupta. Sir, please take it forward.
Thank you so much. I'm so thankful to CRFC and Mr. Rella and other group members for inviting me to talk about and provide my thoughts and perspective on this very interesting and exciting domain of carbon credits in agriculture. What I have done is, ever since we started discussing about this topic, and it was proposed that I handle a session, a masterclass on this particular topic, I've been doing research into this particular domain. I put together some of my slides in the form of a formal presentation. But of course, this being a topic which is very, very emerging, a new topic all across the world, I think it's part of the learning for all of us together in this particular group session. I would therefore invite and request all of you to not only ask questions, because I myself may not be an expert in this particular domain, but then you can also supplement my thoughts and presentations and perspective by way of your views, observation, and experience. So the purpose and objective is, by the end of this session, after about an hour or so, we would all be better informed with regard to the concept, rationale, and the instrumentality of carbon credits in agriculture. So thank you so much for inviting me. Good evening, good morning to all of you, depending upon where you are located. Just give me a second. Let me share my presentation on the screen, please. Thank you. So carbon credits in agriculture is also known as carbon farming and sustainable farming. So we're going to discuss the concept, rationale, and the instrumentality of carbon credits in agriculture, sustainable finance, sustainable agriculture, and carbon agriculture. So what are carbon credits in agriculture? Wow. All of us, we are so very lucky to have been born and living in this beautiful planet that we have, which has been handed over to us by our forefathers with whole bountiful of various amazing gifts of nature. It's a beautiful planet, and we are all very, very lucky to be living on this planet. But in order to live, we all need food. How and where we produce food required for the living of the mankind of this planet is one of the main conservation issues of the 21st century. Right now, this planet is habitated by 7 billion people, and the number is expected to grow by another 2 billion by 2050. And in this crowded planet, that's where the challenge is. How do we feed them all? Going forward, not only there'll be more people, but people will have better living standards. Most of them would have migrated from the bottom of the pyramid to somewhere at least around the middle, and therefore they would have more money, more capacity to spend the money on food. How and where we will produce food in the future is therefore a very, very critical question to consider, discuss, review, and probably answer. And that's the challenge for all of us today on this planet. There is a long list of the sources of carbon emissions. And if I say that agriculture is one of the important source of carbon emissions, contributing to almost about 11% of the overall carbon emissions happening in this environment, it may probably be hard for many people to believe. After all, what does agriculture farming has to do with the problem of global warming? Not many of us may be very clear about the correlation or the direct nexus between the two, the global warming and the agricultural farming. But there is a lot of correlation, huge nexus between the two factors. This presentation, I will try and explain to you what are carbon credits, how they are applicable, how they revolve around agriculture, how the farmers can generate carbon credits, and how they can earn some extra supplemental income by way of selling these carbon credits. They can earn anything, anywhere between $8 a credit to $20 a credit, and therefore it can particularly act as supplemental source of income for the farmers. So if you look at the diagram, what are the total emissions which are happening? The data for the last about 30 years, 1990, almost about 2020. Agricultural emissions are almost about 10 to 11% of overall emissions happening in the environment. And when you talk of agricultural emissions, it is on account of fermentation, use of fertilizers, pesticides, burning crop residues, cultivation of organic soils, and also because of rice cultivation. Intensive application of fertilizers and pesticides since the advent of green revolution the world over has led to depletion of the carbon levels in the soil, and therefore the soil has got degraded. So far as we talk about India, there are estimates which suggest that possibly up to 30% of India's total geographical land area has been degraded, and almost half of this area constitutes agricultural land. Soil comprises of organic matter that includes carbon, that includes nitrogen, phosphorus, and approximately 50% of the soil organic matter is made up of carbon. How much carbon you have in the organic matter, or there is appropriate quantity of carbon available in the organic matter or not, provides a really good indication with regard to overall health of the soil that you're talking about. Now, I came across this very important research paper by Walter Jean, Australian microbiologist and climatologist, who published a paper in 2017, and where he talked about very interesting concept of soil carbon sponge. Earth's soil carbon sponge, which is formed by the mixture of mineral and organic stuff, which has capacity to absorb and retain water, improve access to essential nutrients, and also it supports a diverse range of microbial processes. What happens when the carbon level drops in the earth? The ability of the soil to absorb and retain water also reduces. This constrains the effect of rainfall on the soil and leaves the topsoil prone to runoff and erosion, consequently leading to cycles of floods and droughts. So we talk about the concept of carbon sequestration, which is nothing but the practice of removing carbon from the atmosphere and storing it in the Earth's sponge, so that by the process of carbon sequestration, we can increase, enhance soil carbon levels and reduce carbon dioxide levels in the environment, leading to dual benefit, helping out mitigate the negative impact of climate change and also helping us improve efficiency, productivity of agriculture. Reduction of biomass below the soil, increased soil erosion, and high level of tilling causes a higher percentage of carbon dioxide to be released into the air, which leaves the soil, and the carbon content in the soil, therefore, becomes less, leading to all kinds of problems in the environment, at the same time leading to problems so far as agriculture is concerned. We are all familiar with the CO2 cycle that we have in the ecosystem, going through the process of photosynthesis, looking at the overall biosphere, how there is recycling of matter which happens by way of decay, by way of green shoots, by way of grass regeneration, by way of grazing of animals, soil respiration, and we know how the cycle works in the ecosystem, commonly known as CO2 cycle. Now, it is important to remember, looking at this particular picture, there is an element of nature in which we are living. The environment is also part of the nature, and there is a particular proportion of different kinds of elements, different kinds of gases, and other chemicals which are present in the atmosphere. If the proportion of one of the elements increases or decreases, it is likely to lead to consequential changes in the environmental processes that take place in the biosphere, and that's what is not really going to be positive for the mankind, and that's what we got to really take care of. So you have CO2 in the atmosphere as well. If there was no CO2, or if the blanket was not provided or the cover was not provided by the environment, probably the earth would be, or the temperatures on this earth would be rising very, very high, commonly known as the global warming effect that takes place, because you have different kind of proportion of different gases being present in the atmosphere. So the farmers need to look at maintaining health of the soil. Just as we all take care of our health, physical health, similarly, the farmers need to take care of the health of the soil. They must use such agro techniques such kind of processes and techniques in agriculture that reduces the loss of carbon from the soil. Some of these carbon farming techniques or regenerative agricultural practices include keep the land covered at all times, have some kind of a plantation as kind of a land cover so that the carbon doesn't escape out of the soil. Even though that plantation may not be eatable, maybe by human beings, may not be kind of very, very useful, but nonetheless, at least from protecting the soil atmosphere, it is important to have the land covered at most of the times to the extent possible so that you can retain carbon very essentially required in the soil. Recycling the bio waste of the soil. What kind of manure, biofertilizers you are using for agriculture. Crop rotations and intercropping can definitely help you remaining and retaining carbon in the soil. Reducing flood irrigation and chemical use is also a very important regenerative agriculture practice. When farmers follow these practices, of course, over a period of time, it will not happen in one season. The carbon content of the soil improves. As a result of that, their yield of agriculture goes up. Therefore, farmers may need an incentive to adopt these practices, as these practices may be time-consuming, may be expensive, and possibly also be unremunerative in the short term. That's where we are looking at the concept of carbon credits, which kind of acts as an incentive for the farmers to follow sustainable agricultural practices or regenerative agricultural practices. So the latest farm product is the carbon credits. Carbon credit monetization can just be the required nudge for the farmers to take care and move towards regenerative and sustainable farming. Because improvement of soil health is directly connected with increasing soil carbon levels. What you therefore need is, you've got to keep continuously looking at monitoring your soil carbon levels, and you have also incentive to improve upon the carbon levels because you can earn carbon credits, which you can then trade, sell in the marketplace and get paid for that. That's where we say carbon credit monetization can just be the required incentive for the farmers to follow regenerative and sustainable or carbon farming. Carbon credits, what are carbon credits? Carbon credits are certificates that represent quantities of greenhouse gases, majorly carbon, that have been kept out of the air or removed from it and maintained in the soil or the earth. One carbon credit certifies that 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide has been removed from the atmosphere. How do you measure all this? Of course, there are challenges, but advancements in remote sensing data and artificial intelligence have now enabled us to predict the carbon levels through satellite data. And this is one approach by which the carbon credits are actually calculated. And who is going to purchase carbon credit? Who is going to pay you money for doing all this? Companies and governments purchase carbon credit. They pay the seller of carbon credits because they have to meet certain climate commitments that they would have made to certain international organizations or national governments. They would be willing and motivated to pay a price for buying a carbon credit from someone who would have taken certain actions so as to prevent and preserve and retain the carbon cover in the soil or the earth. What is carbon credit? Carbon is like a crop, similar to other crops that you produce on your farm. A carbon credit or a carbon offset represents either greenhouse gases removed from the atmosphere or vice versa, greenhouse emissions arising from the earth reduced. In the case of farming, carbon credits are created based on carbon dioxide you draw down into your soil and the GHG emissions that you reduce above the soil. Two aspects. How much of carbon dioxide you store in the soil, you draw down, and how much of GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, you reduce above the soil. These are two important indicators with regard to carbon credit. So there is a market available which helps you trade in carbon credits. A system of exchange between people who emit carbon, they are the buyers, and people who draw down carbon, they are the sellers. And an exchange process facilitates the selling of carbon credits by a seller to a buyer, and thus there is exchange of carbon credit and money flow from one person to another. Who are likely to be the buyers? Anyone who has interest or who wants to reward climate change mitigation activities. Maybe an individual company, could be a government. Carbon credits are used to offset CO2 emissions under the cap and trade guidelines set by the Paris Agreement. The idea is that companies responsible for emitting CO2, you have a process by virtue of which the carbon dioxide is going to get released. You can't really happen. You are into particular industry, manufacturing a particular product, CO2 emission is very natural. You can't help it. You have a way out. You pay some money to those people who in their operations control the carbon emission. You are not able to do it, but someone else might be able to do it. No issue at all. You help the other set of people try and remove the CO2 from the air or try and store the carbon in the soil. You pay them out. In that manner, you'll be able to meet the requirement of Paris Agreement in terms of cap and trade. So how to get carbon credits for farmers? There are certain essential characteristics of what a carbon credit is all about. Carbon credits are calculated, identified by way of a complete, I shouldn't actually say accurate, but maybe yes, to a certain extent, yes, by way of a complete, accurate, and a thorough accounting methods. But what is important is you generate a carbon credit when you make some extra efforts for reducing GHG, greenhouse gases, that would not have happened without the carbon credit incentive. Means that if you're doing something naturally, normally, you cannot avail carbon credit. It's only when you make some extra efforts or do something which you otherwise would not have done, but for the nudge of the carbon credit being available, which can be monetized, which can probably generate some revenue for you, you have to show and prove. And it has to be measured by some authority. Yes, you have done something extra, incrementally, over and above what was supposed to be done by you in the normal course. That's where you are able to identify and monetize your carbon credit. Carbon credits are applicable in the projects where the carbon stock undergoes a permanent change in the net soil carbon pool. It should be long time, permanent kind of thing. Whatever you have done, whatever carbon you have saved inside the soil, whatever carbon dioxide you have reduced from the environment, it has to be measured, monitored, authenticated, assured by third-party auditing. Thereafter, only carbon credit certificates would be issued to a particular person. And the carbon credits are uniquely claimed, owned by one entity at a time from creation to retirement. You can't eat, yes, you can't drink it, but you can trade it. That's the nature of carbon credits. When you talk about agricultural produce, various forms of agricultural produce arising out of agricultural land, something that you can eat, something that you can drink. But here you have something which can provide you money, which you can trade, but you can't eat, you can't drink, but you can trade it. That's the true nature of carbon credits. The direct benefit is that farmers receive cash-based incentives for the carbon that they help retain in the land that they own. Of course, there is a market where the rates of carbon credit keep on varying, but on an average, the rate has been around between $8 to something like $20. That's the kind of range that we normally look at in terms of the rates of carbon credit floating around in the market, from something like $8 to $20. How many carbon credits you can earn per acre? Going by experience and research, roughly 1 to 4 carbon credits per acre. Indirect benefit that farmers experiences, there is improvement in the soil health due to the carbon captured in the soil, which leads to high productivity, more effective farming on the part of the farmer. And there are indications. When can you say that the soil health has improved? If the soil has increased water holding capacity, it has lower soil density, it has increased water infiltration, increased nutrient availability, and decreased soil surface temperature. These are all indicators of the health of the soil having been improved as a result of carbon capture happening in the soil, leading to providing some kind of monetary exchange, monetary benefit to the farmer. So how does the carbon credit program work? While it may not be easy for individual farmers to look at carbon credit program all by themselves, mostly because the land holding size may be very, very small. That is what is owned by an individual farmer. But of course, non-profit organizations and FPO, farmer producer organizations, which have large chunks of land under their organization and management, can definitely avail the benefits of carbon credit programs by following regenerative agricultural practices as a group. But the process, as we also talked about in the previous slide, is going to take time. Even if a farmer producer organization starts working on regenerative agricultural practices, the results would not be reflected, would not be available within 1 year, within 2 years. It may take a few years for the results to surface. And therefore, there is need for hand-holding and support of the farmers during at least initial period when the results may not be truly reflective of the kind of efforts which might have already gone into regenerative and sustainable agricultural practices. You may also identify an agriculture technology partner or a project partner. There's some leading companies available in the market. There is the Boomitra, there is the NurtureDate.farm, CarbonX and Carbon Count. They trade in carbon markets. Linking with these companies will enable the farmers' projects to be listed, traded, and facilitate carbon credit sale and purchase. But then everything depends upon how do you measure, how do you verify, identify, sponsor, and approve the carbon credit. There have to be third-party verification companies. Where it's one of the important leading company in this particular domain, which normally takes time to do the verification process. But unless and until the verification is done and the approval is given by some third-party verifier, normally you don't get paid for the carbon credit that you're looking for. Even after approval, the distribution to the FPO of the carbon credit proceeds usually takes from 8 to 12 months after the project is listed and approved. So who are the people who organize the carbon credit market as of now? Primarily, there are two sets of people. You have speculators and you have project developers, pilot project developers. Speculators are investors who try to contract as many acreage of land as they can to trade as many carbon credits as possible. On the other hand, there are pilot project developers who actually connect and work with the growers, work with the farmers and the agribusiness partners, and they act as intermediaries between the producers and buyers of carbon credit, because they are connected with, attached with an agricultural product. They act as intermediaries between the sellers and the buyers of carbon credit. But whether we are looking at speculators or pilot project developers, both of them share the common goal of leveraging carbon credits to promote sustainable farming practices while reducing emissions. Objectives and goals of both of these two set of people are same. Of course, there are challenges in looking at the carbon credit approach to building up regenerative agriculture and sustainable agriculture. Verification itself poses a huge challenge. How do you measure? What is the incremental carbon stored in the soil's earth? What it was before and what is now there as a result of regenerative agricultural practices. Incremental carbon storage, what is there additionally? Not very simple to identify. But then there are tools and techniques available. I'll provide you references of some of those tools and techniques which can be applied to actually work out what is the incremental storage of carbon in the soil's earth, so that you become facilitator for storing carbon in the soil's earth, and you also become a player to sell carbon credits, earn some money additionally for yourself. Once a project is listed, it takes about 8 to 12 months for the cash incentive to reach the farmer or the FPO. But even before the project is listed, it takes about 12 to 18 months time for a project to be listed. Now look at the timelines. 18 months maximum, quite possible for a project to be listed. 12 months for receipt of the cash incentive actually. That's 2.5 years. And then you have to make efforts maybe for a period of 2 years, 3 years before you actually start getting results of your incremental effort. That is what will qualify you to be able to earn some carbon credits, which you can therefore trade in the marketplace. So the point is, it's a long-drawn process. It's a process spread over a time period of something like 4, 5, 6 years. But once the process starts, then it is sort of put in an autopilot. It gathers momentum. It starts operating on year-on-year basis all by itself. But then, of course, it will apply and it will provide maximum benefit where the land holding size is fairly large. As we talk in the Indian context, average land holding size of an Indian farm is just over 1 hectare. Amount of carbon credits received out of 1 hectare of land may not be enough for a small farmer to make all the efforts make investment to adopt regenerative agricultural practices. Nonetheless, carbon credit trading is in a nascent stage as of now. There's not much awareness in the marketplace as well, not amongst the agriculturists or the farmers for that matter, which we are very sure is going to build over a period of time as awareness becomes more and farmers become more aware about the concept of carbon credit and sustainable farming. The concept definitely is going to become more important going forward and can really help us build a better planet for all of us to live on. What can we do to address these challenges? We need to educate the farmers, make them aware about the existence and benefits of carbon credit programs so that the farmers start practicing regenerative agriculture and reap benefits out of that. Market prices of carbon credits are likely to improve in the future. So that will provide additional incentive to the farmers to look at regenerative agricultural practices so that they can monetize carbon credits and raise better value out of that. The process of measuring and verifying carbon is evolving very, very rapidly because of technological innovation, especially the satellites and the artificial intelligence. It's evolving over a period of time. Governments at the state and the central level can play a very, very important role to align existing natural farming, regenerative farming, and sustainable farming schemes so as to provide a nudge, some kind of incentive for the farmers to participate in carbon credit programs. Government really, really has a very important role to play all across the world. For example, government can come out with certain schemes and guidelines which could mandate regular estimation of soil carbon levels, and the said data could be shared with carbon credit verifiers, which will facilitate measurement and verification process and simplify the whole process of generation of carbon credits and their monetization in terms of actual payment to the farmers. What is the state as of today in the US, Europe, Canada? The Growing Climate Solutions Act of 2021 provides authority to US Department of Agriculture to assist farmers to take part in carbon credit markets. There is a law, there is a legal binding, a legal mandated force available which can provide certain kind of guidelines to facilitate farmers to take advantage of the carbon credit programs and markets. In the US, the development of a voluntary market for agriculture carbon credits is prevalent, which is actually aiming at reduction of GHG, greenhouse gases, and also carbon retention on agricultural lands. European nations, they're also encouraging farmers to shift to regenerative farming, but the bloc is yet to develop guidelines how to recognize, how to calculate the carbon credits. Hopefully by the end of 2022, we are almost there. Maybe by middle of 2023, some guidelines are likely to emerge in the European market as well. Canada, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change has developed the federal greenhouse gas offset credit system. Canada's carbon credit market is very, very big and provides huge opportunities to various farmers across the world to be able to take advantage of and participate in the carbon credit exchange program under the Canadian regulations. The Alberta emission offset system covers agriculture along with forestry and carbon capture, storage, and carbon capture and utilization. So we are talking about regenerative farming. What can a farmer do to be able to store more carbon within the soil of the earth to become eligible for generating carbon credits, to become eligible for monetizing those carbon credits and get some revenue out of that. What is that a farmer needs to do? The answer is he needs to practice regenerative farming. What is that? Conventional farming is leading to damage of natural ecosystems, is also leading to global warming. Over farming, too much of the input of chemicals, fertilizers, pesticides, monocrops, they're all contaminating and depleting water resources, which causes soil erosion and destroys habitats. In fact, these farming practices are one of the biggest threats to biodiversity. Worst case scenario, we got to be prepared for that. That might actually lead to Earth becoming a desert. Desertification of the Earth is quite an imminent possibility going by the worst case scenario. Regenerative farming practices can help the degraded land come back to its original qualities, its original nature. They can let ecosystems store planet warming CO2 by using soil as a carbon sink. And regenerative farming is also going to help overall ecosystem by way of boosting wildlife and also promoting biodiversity. So what do you do as part of regenerative farming? One approach is to go for no-till farming, no tilling of the land, so that you will reduce the soil disturbance, which normally happens due to tillage. Don't till the land. Just straight away sow the seed into the earth. There are techniques available which are being followed across the world by many of the countries, by many of the farmers, so that you don't disturb the soil, and therefore the carbon which is there, it remains trapped in that soil, in that sponge, and that helps you overcome the environmental problem. Try and reduce, maybe you can't stop really, but try and reduce the use of synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. Instead of that, go for mob grazing, so that you will have natural manure and compost as a result of mob grazing happening on the land. That will reduce the use of synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. Maximize soil coverage by leaving roots. Promote crop rotation. Move away from monocultures and growing cover crops, which improve biodiversity. Combine livestock rearing with crops and other plants. Integrate the whole biodiversity ecosystem. Create grasslands, grow cover crops, so that carbon can be captured within the soil and stored for a long time. And the best part of it is, by doing all this, the farmers can actually help prevent soil desertification. At the same time, they'll be able to earn carbon credits, which they can monetize and get paid for that. This is how desertification might take place at the worst case scenario if we don't really take care of the planet today. Going forward, that is what we might actually be staring at. So as farmers embrace regenerative farming, their piece of land becomes a net emitter of GNG. From being a net emitter of GNG, it will start storing carbon. In other words, it will become a carbon sink. And that's where they can create carbon credits. And these will be bought by various buyers available in the market. And these people will in turn pay to the farmer for all the efforts that he would have taken for carrying out and changing his farming practices from natural practices to regenerative farming practices. So how do you calculate how much carbon you have additionally stored. I mean, there is appraisal carbon balance tool developed by FAO to calculate the emissions and uptake of carbon by the project. You can visit this website and take guidance from there. There is also a rapid carbon stock appraisal to assess landscape carbon stocks. And you have a carbon accounting software, Comet-Farm, developed by USDA and Colorado State University, which can be used as a scientific basis for future calculation of incentives under carbon credit. So there are tools and techniques available. Of course, these are also evolving. They cannot be said to have become perfect as of now, but nonetheless, there are certain tools and processes available by which the incremental carbon stored in the carbon sink or the soil of the earth can be calculated, which can then be converted into a certain number of carbon credits, which can then be monetized by paying out a certain amount per dollar per carbon credit. That's how the whole mechanic works. Another approach for regenerative farming is grow cover crops. Cover crops are unlike cash crops. They are not planted for the intention of harvesting. No. That sounds very, very ridiculous and interesting as well. So what are cover crops? They are not harvested for the purpose of harvesting them, but still we get a lot of benefit by growing cover crops. They protect the soil from erosion, and they also improve the nutrient conditions of the soil. Cover crops are grown to help keep the soil intact, which otherwise would be bare against the winds, rain, water, and even tillage. Cover crops are becoming popular as the world fights climate change. Actually, they now account for almost about 43% of the land available to the mankind. Popular examples of cover crops are, you can use barley, you can use oats, maybe some other crops for that matter. Cover crops boost the capacity of agricultural land to draw down carbon emissions and store more carbon in the carbon sink, the carbon sponge, or the soil of the earth. So the benefits of carbon or cover crops, it will help you increase the crop yield. It will sequester carbon. It will store more carbon in the sponge. It will provide habitat for the pollinators. It will better absorb rain and retain soil moisture. Ultimately, it will help improve the health of the soil as well as the water quality. It is estimated roughly that 20 million acres of cover crops can sequester 66 million tons of CO2 equivalent a year. Huge amount. This is almost equal to emissions of 13 million vehicles. This is why growing cover crops qualifies the farmers for a carbon offset program, which can provide additional revenue for the farmers. More and more farmers are looking at and considering carbon cover crops for the generation of additional revenue potential by way of sale and trading of carbon credits. So this is a grass cover, which adds biodiversity to an almond orchard, which aids in nutrient cycling and provides habitat for beneficial insects, while also building soil organic matter. This is a clover and grass cover crop, this particular picture. We talked about carbon credits, but another concept, slightly unpopular, not very well talked about, discussed, known, nitrogen carbon credits. One way to look at nitrogen carbon credit is to place nitrogen with the right depth in the soil by opting for the no-till approach to farming. The goal is to reduce the amount of nitrogen that's lost from the soil and go into the crop for better growth and more yield. No-tilling is a farming exercise that falls under regenerative agriculture because tilling causes desertification. No-till is a farming technique that can help reduce nitrogen emissions. A grower can adopt no-till and other regenerative farming methods that reduce nitrogen emissions and thus determine how much of that emission has been prevented, and then you can work it out, convert that in terms of carbon credits and cash that out by trading those carbon credits in the market. Very important chart here, how farm practices could help reduce agriculture's carbon footprint. The top line is the GHG greenhouse gas emissions in the entire US agricultural sector. Now, if you follow prescribed grazing, the blue line is going to taper down, it's going to come down quite a lot. Nitrogen management will help you reduce the GHG. Cover crops will also help you out. No-till will also help you out. All this cumulatively is going to impact a lot in terms of reduction of greenhouse gases, which directly are connected with and responsible for global warming. So the chart shows how the impact of practices cumulatively adds up, and that ultimately leads to reduction of greenhouse gases in the environment and thus preventing global warming, which is not really useful for the mankind. So we should actually be looking at farming practices which are sustainable. What is sustainable farming? That meets the needs of existing and future generations, while also ensuring profitability, environmental health, social and economic equity. It is also a way to support the achievement of the global goals, Sustainable Development Goals 2030, zero hunger. Sustainable agriculture really makes a difference to the environment. It uses up to 56% less energy per unit of crops produced if you use sustainable agricultural practices. And it also creates 64% fewer greenhouse gas emissions per hectare, thus hugely supporting greater levels of biodiversity in the environment. Sustainable agriculture is economically viable. It has to be profitable as well as sustainable. If it is not profitable, it's not going to be sustainable. It has to be socially supportive. It should support and provide help in improving the quality of life of the farmers, the families, the farm communities, and it should also be ecologically sound. We must preserve the natural resource base available on this planet that ultimately sustains us all. Sustainability is all about becoming a good corporate citizen, becoming a good citizen of this world by building healthy soil, preventing erosion, managing water very wisely, minimizing air and water pollution, sequestration of carbon, storing carbon on the farms, increasing resilience to extreme weather, promoting biodiversity. All these are dimensions of sustainability that we look for. So there are certain principles in order to get action oriented towards sustainable farming. Principle number one, improving efficiency in the use of resources. How do you improve the efficiency of all the input resources that go into agriculture? That's very crucial for building up an architecture of sustainable agriculture. Sustainability requires direct action to conserve, protect, enhance natural resources. Recycle, reuse, whatever you do, conserve, protect, enhance natural resources. Principle number 3, any kind of agriculture practice that fails to protect and improve rural livelihoods and social well-being obviously can never be sustainable. Sustainable agriculture enhances resilience of the people, resilience of the ecosystem. And good governance, of course, is very, very key element of sustainability. When we talk about ESG, we have environment, societal, governance. Third element is G, which is very, very vital. How do you look at the entire mindset, the entire architecture of whatever you're trying to do by way of sustainable farming? It has to be administered by way of very, very effective governance process. That's where good governance becomes essential for sustainability to be brought into the agricultural system. Most of these elements we have already discussed. So what are sustainable agricultural practices? Rotation of crops. Crop diversity practices include intercropping and complex multi-year crop rotations. Planting of cover crops that we just now discussed, because cover crops keep soil covered and thus maintain living roots in the ground the year round, which helps in sequestration of carbon in the carbon sink. Reduce or eliminate till, no-till, or reduced tilling methods, which involve inserting seeds directly into the undisturbed soil, which can really reduce erosion and can help improve the soil health. Applying integrated pest management. There are different techniques available for IPM. You can use mechanical methods, you can have biological controls, which can be applied systematically to keep the pest population under control, while at the same time minimizing the use of chemical pesticides. Integrating livestock and crops. Smart integration of crop and animal production can really make the farms more efficient and profitable as part of the sustainable farming. Adopt agroforestry practices. Mix trees, shrubs into their operations so that some of these could provide shade and shelter, could actually protect plants and animals and water resources, by also probably potentially offering additional income by way of fruit and nut crops. So look for adopting agroforestry practices. Irrigation techniques, very important. Crop production relies heavily on irrigation, requiring huge amount of water. Sustainability aims to support plant hydration needs by some other means, yet optimizing water and energy consumption. And then holistic approach, managing the whole biodiversity and ecosystem so that you are able to have very, very effective integration of the entire ecosystem elements that can really help you control erosion, reduce nutrient reduction, and support bees and other pollinators and biodiversity in general. You can also look at permaculture as a sustainable agriculture technique. Permaculture, which looks at sustainability, promoting sustainability by reducing waste, using replenishable sources, tackling pollution, and improving soil fertility in nature-friendly ways. What kind of sustainable agriculture practice you want to follow? It depends upon the crop type. It also depends upon the topography, also depends upon the farm specifics. But still, the best practice is going to be one which is based upon holistic management, integrating all the elements of biodiversity ecosystem, because all the different elements are interconnected, equally valued, and therefore they must always remain in harmonious balance with each other so as to provide the right kind of environment on this particular planet for all of us. What many of these practices have in common is keeping farm soils protected. They must always be imbibed with living organisms, which can solve many of the problems associated with industrial agriculture. As we've been talking, living soil holds water like a sponge. It prevents pollution. And thus, the key theme connecting many of these practices is all about looking at diversification and adoption of regenerative farming practices. What is important is, if the farmers have to adopt these kind of sustainable farming practices, what we need to do, we intelligentsia need to continue to support them by way of agroecology research. Make them aware about the best practices in these areas and help them make effective use of the science and technology available for making sustainable farming and regenerative farming more effective. With countries across the world making climate commitments, India has a commitment of zero carbon economy by 2070. The interplay of carbon credit markets with farmers is likely to evolve and become very important over the coming years. However, given the multifaceted benefits of increase in the soil carbon levels, the carbon credit approach may just be the right kind of incentive, may just be the right kind of nudge that would motivate the farmers to adopt regenerative agricultural practices and help combat climate change. There has to be a balance between technology, productivity, employment, sustainability. The triangle shows technology intervention in agriculture can really help improve the livelihood of their farmers by increasing their income level. It can also help improve productivity of agricultural operations and ultimately also provide sustainability by way of low carbon emission and resource usage. So there has to be a holistic approach that we all need to follow by way of integration of technological balance in productivity, employment, and sustainability. So to close out, what are the areas of action? Advocacy is very important. We all need to advocate regenerative, sustainable farming practices, supporting both positive environmental and social outcomes. We must develop and design ecosystem services market so that farmers can capture new value by following regenerative agricultural practices. Everything has to be moving around social equity, appropriate standards, appropriate benchmarks, appropriate commitments to build up a better economy going forward through sustainable farming and regenerative farming, and building farmers' access to the markets so that they can really take advantage of the various kinds of incentives available in the market for following sustainable and regenerative marketing practices. I think that's really going to help we all move forward in future across the world. That's where I close my formal presentation. Would be very pleased to have some of you supplementing my views here, my perspectives here, so that we all end up this session becoming wiser by way of your observations, my perspectives, my thoughts. It's an interplay that we have to all appreciate, understand, and learn from each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. I think let me go first. So I'm Srinivas Rao Rela. I'm a postgraduate in agriculture, but finally, subsequently, I was diversified into multiple areas. I don't know what I'm doing. I have some understanding about agriculture, some understanding about finance, some understanding about technology, some understanding about economy. So with all these things, first of all, I want to actually thank all the participants. I have seen, I think, a lot of, my friends from agriculture. That is really exciting today. The second thing, I'm really happy because you have actually reminded me a lot of concepts which I studied in my agriculture college.
Yeah, I
Right
know.
from your integrated pest management, zero tillage, sustainable agriculture, sustainable whatnot. You reminded all those things. Maybe I think before actually opening the session for the question and answer, I just want to actually tell you one thing, maybe
Yeah.
encapsulating
Yeah,
the
that's okay.
entire discussion. So, mainly for the agriculture people who have joined. All along, I think we are suggesting the cropping pattern based on multiple variables like what is the rainfall, what is the soil structure, what is the demand, all those things we are doing it. Now, what we are suggesting is you need to capture another two important variables. One is the climate change, another is your carbon credits. Do factor these two things and come out with, I think, your own suggestions of the cropping pattern for a specific region so that, for example, the moment zero tillage, so I think you will take a step back, right? It is not that. I think our advice is now all these things are contextual and we are telling because of the, I think the net zero, I think target for all the governments, there are two important variables which you need to actually factor while proposing the cropping patterns. And from CRFC, actually, I'm thinking of, I think, coming out with one more division, which is exclusively focusing on the sustainable agriculture and carbon credits.
Wow.
And we
Okay.
want to actually come out with, we are actually working on that also, a technology enablement. So that's what I think we are going to start that very soon. So just, I think I just thought of, I think, giving
Very
my
good. Very
this
good. Yeah,
before,
that's right. I know.
before opening the question and answer session. Anyone, I think, ask any questions?
So let's have some interesting observations from the people present here. So
Please.
Yeah, good evening, sir. This is
good evening, sir.
yeah, good evening. This is Krishna Prem Pinsetti. I have a small question. Can you please go back to the presentation where you have shown the graph? Like there is a benchmark level of this GHG or there's something like that, and then we are following four things. One is combined grazing, one is nitrogen management. By following all those four, we can bring down that GHG emission or something like that. I have seen the slide there.
Let me check. Yeah.
I think it's in the last 10 slides or last 7 to 8 slides.
Sure. This one?
Graph. This one.
Yes, please.
Okay. How farm practices could slash agricultural carbon footprint. What is this nitrogen management exactly?
That's what we talked about. Very slightly unpopular concept of nitrogen carbon.
Okay.
Nitrogen carbon. That's what we talked about. Instead of talking about pure carbon, we are talking about nitrogen carbon, which also, if it can be stored in the soil's layer, it is beneficial for sustainable farming, and it can also help you generate carbon credits.
Okay. So this nitrogen carbon credits, that is what you're talking about.
Yes,
so
please.
this is
Yes.
also possible by regenerative farming methods?
Absolutely. That is why they are saying, if we don't do anything at all, the greenhouse gas emission is going to be that straight line right on top in green color. But if we follow some of these practices, if we follow prescribed grazing, we're going to follow a decline in the level blue line. If we follow nitrogen management, there's going to be some reduction. Cover of crops, some reduction. No tilling, some reduction. All this put together, if you're able to take efforts and make efforts in all these directions, cumulatively, it could really make a big impact in reduction of GHG going forward in the future.
Yes, sir. I'm constrained to come here, intervene. The carbon nitrogen ratio is what is required. Maybe you are putting different.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Yeah, obviously, the basic ratio is required to be there.
Will be 20. You have to maintain. See, whatever you do, the cover crops or
absolutely.
What you have to do is you have to maintain that carbon to nitrogen ratio so that there will be safe level of microorganisms which go and capture nutrients from deeper layers as low as 20-30 feet.
Absolutely.
You should have good agricultural practices before you think of good action plans.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. You're very, very right. You're
Stuff.
very, very right. So the problem right now to start up the whole process is we need to create awareness. How many farmers, even big farmers, big agriculturists, how many of them are really aware about the concept of regenerative farming, sustainable farming, carbon credits, things like that? We really, really need to reach on to all of them by we have various programs, various outreach programs, so that we are able to inculcate in them some kind of a basic understanding, knowledge of these concepts, so that going forward, things will improve. Maybe it will take 25 years, 50 years.
But let not the audience mistake the carbon dioxide stored in the soil for soil organic carbon. They are two independent things. No, your slides are slightly confusing the farmer. Carbon is different here. Carbon dioxide is different here. While
Yes, sir.
carbon has, a better humus production, it will lead to humus production,
Yeah.
and thereby keeping the soil healthy with the retention of all these microorganisms.
Absolutely.
Where we envisage the carbon content to be as high as 3 in the organic and natural farming. Unfortunately, governments are not thinking on those lines. They only accept talking organic farming and natural farming.
I know. That's where the government advocacy has to happen.
To the organic and natural farming through these measures and the measurements. Where are
Yes.
the soil testing device for biological components measurement? Please be honest. We are talking about carbon credits.
I know. No, that's a challenge. There are no specific methods available, tools available by which you can really measure what is the incremental increase in the carbon sink.
Now, assuming you are able to have decided C2N of 20 for your own technical reasons, but where are the measurements you see on the real situation, field situation, about the measurement of these biological or chemical testing is already there. The biological, which matters for the organic and natural farming in terms of providing the soil microorganisms, which go and fetch nutrients from as low as 20 feet, 30 feet. They are already there under the soils.
Yeah.
So all these factors have to be reflected, you see, in these policies.
Sure,
I don't know, as an engineer turned farmer, I have gone through all these processes. And we must definitely utilize this Indian Institute of Technology or the other institutions, technological institutions, to think on these lines. And then see, every line of yours is carry meaning. But
absolutely,
if it has to be made really, actionable.
Absolutely. How to make it operative is the challenge. Yeah, that's right.
Otherwise, the carbon.
Gupta, sir. Hello.
Yes, Mr. Gupta, that is what my next question is, because we are into contract farming, and then we have around 10,000 farmers under our company, where we have gone into contract farming of tobacco, and then all these regenerative methods that you have said in the presentation, we have been following all this. But right now, what we have got is we have got some ESG reports to follow. So how can we show, and then how can we quantify the things that you have said? Because we are following all this cover crops, this green manuring, FYM, less usage of chemicals, all these things we are doing, but we are unable to quantify. So do you know anyone who can quantify all these things, or do you know any vendors who will be coming forward and then quantifying all these, and then making
there are agencies and organizations available which use certain tools. 2-3 important sources of these kind of organizations and the tools I also shared in my presentation. I can certainly connect with you. I can certainly connect some people with you who can really do this work for you, sir. Yeah.
Guptaji, this is Pratap. Guptaji, Ashwin was just a moment. Just as Guptaji, I see all your slides running down on basically the farming cropping pattern. So basically, in Indian conditions, the grain crop array, that is, you can take up to the paddy or wheat and other crops.
Yeah.
So this is all about showing social forestry or agroforestry, that type of thing that supports this one. But
Yes.
what is the way for the, if you have a take of districts of coastal districts or Bengal or other places where the paddy is more. So paddy, we need to till it. We need to, what is the way? What is the way? I didn't understand, because this we are talking about agroforestry with the barren lands or something that carbon credits can be achieved. But a farmer of this type of
I know it is specific to a particular region.
Yeah.
In some of the region, you can't really generalize the whole concept of sustainable farming and regenerative farming. You can't apply all the techniques
yeah.
to the places. It has to be in the context of the topography, the ecology, the particular location of the particular land, the kind of crop that you're producing over there, and the kind of environment, rainfall, temperature, things like that. So that's where you got to distinguish where certain regenerative and sustainable farming practices are applicable. In some of the cases, they may not be applicable. That clear rational distinction.
Yeah, rational distinction is there, right?
Yeah. You can't generalize.
Let me answer this one.
Yes, sir. Yes,
sir. So I think what we want to say is this carbon credit, climate change, and agriculture, and it is having multi-dimensional problem. This is not a single problem, and here we are not proposing anything. What we are actually doing it is I think we want to share the knowledge what we have on this climate change, and mainly I think the CRFC has been quoted to understand the climate change impact on the financial institutions. If you see, I think the name also Climate Resistant Financial Council, the main objective is that. Then I think we ourselves, because it's a learning process even for CRFC, and we realized that sustainable agriculture and carbon credits is another important area which I think we need to actually focus and do that. That is the reason we are actually going to come out with a separate division in CRFC, which will be focused only on that aspect. So during that, this is the first session we are conducting on this sustainable agriculture and carbon credit. Now I think I realized the importance, and I understand, I think lot of interest is also there. So we are actually going to do that, and we are willing to collaborate with all of you actually to come out with the different strategies, policies, and even guidance to the government. And what we are going to bring is we are going to bring the international experience on this climate change and the carbon credit and the technology aspects also, because I think we are already working on a couple of apps, okay, for connecting the farmers. Just like I think for all these services, we are actually in the process of developing, and we are about to launch sometime in Jan-Feb. So that is one thing. Another thing is we want to develop another app for carbon footprint. So like this, I think we are the enablers, and here it's a non-profit organization. So we are the enablers, and we want to actually share the knowledge, whatever we are gaining, whatever we are doing it in collaboration with all of you. Agriculture, the masters, absolutely we will agree, and we want to have a collaboration and just I think do whatever we can do for this industry. I think that's what I can say.
Yes, please.
Sir, once the carbon credit starts, so it will be a continuously, or every year it has to be?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Not every year, but periodically, you will have to do the assessment. What is the incremental carbon that you have stored in the carbon sink of the soil? Depending upon the carbon credit will be generated and will be monetized. So not every year for that.
So we might not be getting the every year that income.
No. Depends upon the farm size. If the farm size is really, really very, very big, possibly every year you could be generating some carbon credits. But for normal, reasonable, optimum size of the farm, I think every year that will not generate. It's going to happen periodically. Maybe every 3 years, maybe every 5 years. It will not happen every year. Yeah.
Thank you.
One more thing, Mr. Gupta, in your presentation, you said that the average land holding of Indian farmer is greater than 1 hectare. So have you considered the whole India, or is it particular to a particular region? So how
this is what I could research from the Google this thing. I'm not too sure whether it covers the entire or the particular area. I'm not too sure about that, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta.
Thank
It
you.
is generally very less, I believe. If I remember correctly, my college.
I know it should be very
0.15
less.
hectare.
That's what I also think. Yeah, it should be less.
It is very, very
Okay.
less. It's a fragment.
Anyway, thank you.
So I think any questions, because we have another meeting in the next 8 minutes. So if you have any questions, I think you can ask now. Otherwise, I think you can actually send.
Yeah. I would
My
be.
question, sir.
Yes,
I'm
please.
Sukumar, Dr. Sukumar,
Yeah.
Assistant Professor of Public Administration. Sir, from the perspectives of, sir, very wonderfully you analyzed it, sir.
Thank
But
you.
from the point of view of the nexus between government and corporate sector, because they have been influencing a lot the practices. Whatever you said, the practices point of view, it's a very wonderful, sir. When it comes to the forming, no, sir, it is being influenced from the profit point of view, the corporate sector in turn, which has been affecting the government.
Yeah.
So how to reduce that? Because again, that has become a climate change and the climate risk point of view, sir. But without, of course, some corporate sector knowingly or unknowingly making us to implement the practices of the corporate sector, how to avoid and how far we are going to do it. When
I think there is growing awareness in the corporate sector regarding triple P or triple bottom line concept, that they should not only be looking at profit maximization. That's only one single P. They also got to start carefully looking at the other two Ps: people, planet. What impact is their corporate operations having on the people, on the society on this planet, as well as on the environment, the planet, and to which now fourth P has been added, that's pandemic. So you've got to take care of profit, people, planet, pandemic, all put together. And there are a lot of investors, real life in the marketplace, who are very, very conscious where they are going to put their money on. They're not only blindly going to put their money in a corporate, they are going to in future, they're going to really, really look at and assess whether company is looking at society's well-being, people well-being, environmental caring. Only then they will regard the company as a good bet for putting their money on. So I think awareness is slowly growing all across the world. Hopefully things will improve in future.
Sir, is a pollution board is going to help it out in this aspect?
Pollution board has a role to play, of course. Pollution board
currently it is having any role on this carbon credits?
No, not as of now. Not as of now. But going forward, I think we can advocate. They can really leverage and they can become the pivot around which the whole process and architecture of carbon credit can really, really evolve, at least in India. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So we are all listening about and studying some articles and all. Now we got a clear picture of
thank you, sir. Thank
session.
you. Thank you.
I must thank you and organizing Mr. Srinivas also Rela for this valuable session, which as agriculture graduates, we never care of agriculture. We are moving here and there.
Yeah.
This guy is sitting in the US, now he has started. And I am sitting in somewhere else doing some IT job. So it's the time for us all. So he has somehow, he has connected all of us. So
thank you.
Good stepping stone.
Yeah, great idea. Great idea, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta, and then thank you, Mr.
So much, thank you.
Because today we have learned so many new things that have been there. So we came to know about this carbon credits only by your presentation.
Thank you.
So I sincerely want to thank you and then Mr. Rela Rao for sharing this. It will be very much helpful if you please share the presentation.
Sure,
so
I'll share the presentation with
I'll a mail to Mr. Rela Rao also.
Sure.
Regarding this.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mr. Rela, for organizing this wonderful presentation.
Kashyap, can you propose vote of thanks? And those people, before handing over the session to Kashyap, I request you sincerely, I think, provide your email IDs. I think we want to have a collaboration and we can definitely do something, I think, for the agriculture sector by collaborating with finance, economists, technologists, and the data
Absolutely.
We can definitely do something good for the agriculture, and we are willing to do that. And again, I am saying CRFC is a non-profit association, and we are here just to educate, create awareness, people. Okay, so I'm handing over the session to Kashyap.
One small point here. Do you have carbon capture and storage as a phenomenon here? See, when you try to capture and then try to store under the soil, you have any mechanisms to see to measure these things? Otherwise, there will be leakages in the system.
I know. So that measurement system has to be robust. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
Not only measurement. See, where are these things going to? You must have a GPS.
I know. You must keep a track where actually it is going, under the soil, down the soil, where exactly it is going. You are very right, sir.
To find out where these are getting leaked or system. All that has to be seen in the totality.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think soil sampling regularly, that record has to be maintained. I think carbon for organic carbon.
Okay, Keshav, you want to propose the vote of thanks process?
Yeah. Okay. So thank you everybody for joining, and it was really a insightful session from Dr. Gupta, and the questions which were raised were really it was very much it mentioned that whoever joined the meeting were having very much deep interest in the topic, and the topic was also very much relevant in today's time. And as shared by Siddharth, you can connect to us via email ID shared in the inbox, and we shall also be sharing the recording of the session on our LinkedIn page.
Okay.
And you may share with your all your connections, so that you can also follow
wider awareness.
Yeah, so definitely from next time we are expecting some more people from your second connections in our master classes. Thank you everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable time.